Bobby Johnson, well done, Manchester United.
It's a Sheringham, and Solskjaer has done it! And it's half saved it! United again! René! A magnificent goal by Robin van
Persie. Welcome to United Hour, your official Red Cafe podcast for all things Manchester United. I'm your host, Nick.
I'm Colm.
I'm Craig.
And we welcome Ryan Baldi, our special guest for the week. Hello, Ryan.
How's it going, guys?
Yeah, welcome to you. And even though you're not open about it online, you are a United fan. We're outing you for that today. And we'll be chatting about a book you're working on a little bit later on. But we're recording 24 hours after the FA Cup semi-final. So, I think we should get straight into chatting about the match yesterday. I was there at Wembley. It was obviously a great day for us. And, Colm, what were your initial thoughts from yesterday?
I was absolutely buzzing. It goes, I think, a long way to redeeming some of the more bitter notes of the season. And it's been a very up and down season, particularly with Mourinho, but this was another very, very, very good performance. Not dissimilar to the derby a couple of weeks ago, in that we actually battled back a bit from adversity, which I think is something that's been just not part of our DNA since Fergie left in any way, shape or form with Van Gaal or Moyes. And indeed under Mourinho, we haven't always just had the amount of spirit or the resilience that I would associate with a Mourinho team, and the kind of mental fortitude is something I think he looks for in a lot of players. And it's a sort of a trait that really appeals to him. And yet a lot of the time I think we've been a bit soft and a bit just kind of easy to turn over. So again, it was really nice, particularly against a very good team, which Tottenham are, even though they bottled it again, which they have a horrible habit of doing, not only in semi-finals, I think they're 8th in a row, but just in general, and losing a one-horse race, was that it, a few years ago in the league? But no, very, very, very happy. A lot of very good performances, and some performances from players that haven't had the best of years, which I've been very pleased with. It is a little bit of a shame that it's coming right at the end, but I think, an FA Cup win and second place would be very hard to argue about, in terms of Mourinho's output and this team's output. I think you could definitely point at maybe stylistically poor games and poor patches where we haven't played great football. You could point at certain individuals who maybe haven't flourished or aren't flourishing under Mourinho, but broadly, in a results business, an FA Cup in a second place after 3 trophies the year before, you would really struggle. And a very good points finish in the league, so all good stuff, all good.
Yeah, we have been fairly critical of Jose at various points in the season, and I think he's been getting a lot of stick from all round, and he's been really hot in the past few weeks about saying, I'm not getting enough credit, the team's not getting enough credit, it has been a decent season, and he was still, banging that out. And it's difficult to argue with, really, assuming we do finish second, got a cup final, and especially in a season where City have been, absolutely ridiculous. Well, at the start of the season anyway, and far away from us. But look, we can't really complain too much with this season. It was a great day out for the match goers yesterday as well. Even just getting these Wembley trips, everybody turns up en masse. There was, of course, this bit of a worry about the fact that Tottenham were, in theory, the home team. We complained in the last podcast about the fact that these semis should be at neutral venues, and still pine for the days when they used to go around the country and play them with a Villa Park and that kind of thing. But look, it was still a great day out. Everybody turned up like they do, and I had actually planned. I met a couple of guys central London for a few pre-match pints, and then we had planned to be in the park before the game near Wembley, but then in the end it actually hammered it down with rain out of the blue, that scuppered that plan. But still managed a few drinks, and in fact I went to this game for our Red Cafe listeners with Noodle Hair, who's well known, one of our contributors on Red Cafe there, so I was quite ready for somebody with a quite depressing, pessimistic attitude, and he said, I'm not confident about this at all, because obviously Spurs did us completely when we played them, what was it, a couple of months ago now?
Scored after 30 seconds.
Well, exactly, and it was 2-0 after 15-20 minutes. But again, look, we started badly. I mean, I don't know, and it's been kind of pattern in a few games now, really. I don't know what the issue is with that, how we start, but that mental kind of resilience to come back into the game is massive. Like you say, it's things we used to remember from Fergie's days, and now it's been against City, and we had that great comeback against Palace.
Yeah.
Now in this big match, and again earlier in the season against Chelsea. It is huge to see this. Like I say, for the mental strength of the team going into next season, things like that are really going to make a huge difference. I mean, I don't know if you had any thoughts about the lineup, Craig, when it was announced. Was it what you were expecting or anything? Because I know you always play the lineups game and try and predict who's going to be starting our games.
I mean, I kind of expect this a little bit different. I was expecting Bournemouth to come into it a bit more, where you said that they were auditioning against Bournemouth, and it seems that only really Jones was properly auditioning. I kind of was a little bit disappointed seeing the lineup because obviously Sanchez and Pogba had been playing a little bit poor. Obviously, there was a game against City for Pogba, but I wasn't looking forward to it after seeing the lineup at all. So I was quite surprised that we did well, because Sanchez hasn't exactly had a blistering start to his United career. So I really was hoping to see someone else in the lineup other than him.
Yeah, he was the one who seemed at danger of not starting. Mourinho would make some pretty hardcore comments about who was going to play and who were, like you say, in the end, he kind of went with.
The comments were really odd, though, because it was really hard to tell who was actually directing them at, and like who was actually being rested and who wasn't being rested, because obviously he dropped Matic, but that was clearly for a rest. He dropped Sanchez, which you kind of felt after the West Brom game, that was maybe, pointedly, that he wasn't happy with the performance. Pogba, the same, although he got to play, 60, 70 minutes at Bournemouth. It's an odd one, because for me, in a final or a semi-final, a big cup game, form pretty much goes out the window. Both team form, individual form, and you go to your tried and tested. For me, Sanchez has a tremendous record at Wembley, an absolutely tremendous record. Obviously, when Arsenal played there, and they've won 7 World Cups, FA Cups under Wenger, so he was in a few big games at Wembley, and always. I
think he's scored in every Wembley game he's played, something like that.
It's crazy. They were showing the highlights before the game, and it was just goal after goal after goal, and loads of different kinds of goals. So he's just a man for the big occasion, in that sense. Pogba, been dealing with a lot lately with Paul Pogba. Every man and his dog has an opinion on where he should play, how he should play, what the problem is, and the prevailing wisdom seems to be that he should just be, played in a 3-man midfield, which I know Alex has been saying all year round, but also just keeping the game a wee bit more simple. But in terms of the team selection, I think Lingard is another man who loves a final, who you would maybe want to see Martial or Rashford maybe give him more of a chance, a bit more cutting edge. But really, I mean, the front three was able to press, which was very good, and broadly, when you take out the first 20 minutes to a man, we played extremely well. It was really just that wobble at the start and a very slow start against a very dynamic, very kind of go straight at you Spurs team, which has been the problem when we've played them every time this year, But I think as soon as we weathered that storm, and particularly once we got our goal, there was only ever one winner, really.
Yeah, Ryan, how confident were you pre-match yesterday?
Not especially, to be honest with you. I think it was owing more to the game at the back end of January at Wembley against Spurs, where they just dominated the midfield. I did expect Mourinho he seems to have sort of put a bit of faith in the idea that a 3-man midfield is the best way to go, which is what a lot of fans, a lot of pundits have been saying for pretty much since Pogba joined the club, that he needs to be playing in a 3-man midfield, as you alluded to. I think Mourinho's finally coming round to that way of thinking. So I was quite confident he would go with 3 to shore things up a little bit, because when United went 2v2 against Spurs in January, Spurs just completely ran through United in the middle of the park. Matic was left exposed, Pogba was out of position, getting bullied by Dembele, but he completely reversed the tables this time. And United won that midfield battle. I think the first 20 minutes or so, Spurs looked like they were going to be stamping their foot down again. They got the early goal again, and all kind of looked a little bit too familiar. But as you mentioned in the opening, that fight was there. They managed to turn things around. I think going forward, the only thing that they need to add to their performances now is to not need that kick up the backside to be the catalyst for them to pull out these kind of displays. So that's the only real downside to it. But overall, looking at the team lineups, I thought I'm a big I'm one of those Martial FC guys. I must admit, I'm a big fan. I do think United's best lineup contains both him and Sanchez. I think there's a way to fit them both in. I think you try Sanchez on the right because he's going to roam wherever you play him. So better to play him there and keep Martial to give us a bit of natural width down the left. But you can't really argue with it. I think Jesse Lingard also has earned his place in these big games. And even though he didn't really stand out, especially, he eased the pressing from the front, like you mentioned, and he did a good job of kind of maintaining the width, which is something that was desperately lacking against West Brom the week before when Mata and Sanchez played in the wide positions. You could have thrown a handkerchief over both of them in the middle of the park at times. And with Young and Valencia lacking a bit of athleticism at their age at the moment, there was no width whatsoever. So I think having Lingard staying wide really helped things and opened the game up a little bit. So yeah, I wasn't hugely confident going into the game, but after weathering that 20-minute storm, it was all United really, wasn't it?
Yeah, we were. I mean, like I say, in that first 20 minutes, it was pretty worrying, and we were probably lucky to come out of that only one down, really. They had a couple of other kind of openings here and there. And yeah, I thought we were really struggling. I mean, I was sat right in the top tier at Wembley. And, when you sit high up at matches, you get this kind of slightly different perspective where you do see the game a little bit more tactically, how teams are set up, who's moving where. And yeah, it was very clear that Spurs had their fullbacks pushed very far forward and right hugging the touchline. And yeah, if you remember earlier in the season, Mourinho went and changed his formation when we played a team like Spurs to match them. So we were like kind of matching them all the way. Whereas in the last two games against them, he stayed more like with the 4 at the back. And so it means the likes of Young and Valencia are tucked far more inside, and there's a lot of space for those wide Spurs players when they get that ball. And we were kind of struggling to deal with that for a while. Especially on Young's side, I think, as you mentioned, Ryan, that Lingard was doing good work on the right side to protect Valencia pretty well. But on the left side, it seemed too many times that they were getting the ball with too much space. And yeah, that's where the goals come from, really. I mean, Colm, who would you blame for that goal? Whose fault is it?
It's a tough one. I totally understand what Young's doing. So, I mean, the keeper, it wasn't Lloris, it was Vorm, kicks it short, takes it to Davison Sanchez, who's then kind of in the right back position. Trippier sort of pushes up and Young goes to him. I don't know. Do you know what? The people who are most to blame probably are actually the forwards, because why Young has to step that far out to press from a goal kick when they've played it short, I can't understand. I don't understand where Sanchez, where Lukaku, where Lingard were. Young steps right out and really goes to press. And he actually, as he's going, has a look around his shoulder and you can see him gesturing with his arm to Pogba. You need to drop in there. You need to drop in on Eriksen, who was, I thought, Spurs' best player by far, and is along with Son, probably my favourite Spurs player. He's a player I've got a lot of time for. A majestic player. I'd love to see him move on to, with absolutely no disrespect, a bigger club, because I do think he could play at pretty much any club in world football and would look outrageous at a Barcelona. But he was a thorn in our side constantly because he can hug the touchline and he can play wide right, and he's very cute with the ball. He's never going to really beat a man for pace, but he's got so many other feathers in his cap. He can stand you up, he can produce a bit of skill, but really it's all about his passing range, his short and long passing, his crossing. Everything is done with the absolute utmost technical ability. So to let him just roam down your right flank and then give him all the time in the world to cross in a ball, the net result, provided the run's there, is going to be a goal or at least a chance for someone, Pogba doesn't track him. Someone in commentary, I can't remember who it was, as I was watching it, basically said Pogba doesn't think Davison Sanchez can make that pass, and it actually is an extremely good pass. So as much as you can say it's extremely poor, it's also a bit of an odd one, because Sanchez really whips that ball down there, and it is, for a centre-back, an extremely good pass. I don't think Chris Smalling or Phil Jones would be stepping out of defence and curling one in behind for any of our players to run onto. So it's a tough one, but I think ultimately it has to be Pogba. But I wouldn't lambast him for it. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's sort of a combination of small errors. And in fairness, Spurs execute that. You're talking 3 passes, goal. It's an extremely well worked piece of play from Spurs. The ball from Eriksen is absolutely incredible. Dele Alli, in fairness to him, can't stand the fella, but makes a great run, good finish. De Gea has no chance. It's just one of those goals. Very hard to be too critical of anyone in particular, but it is a combination of errors, combination of poor play, people maybe not being switched on. But I think a bit of credit to Spurs, because they were really pushing on at the start. They were on top of everything. They do give a lot, almost like Liverpool in the opening minutes of the game. And I think you can always see the result kind of later in the game. And if they don't put the game to bed, it always comes back to bite them a little bit, because they expend so much energy by being almost everywhere. And I think if Son had a bit of a better game, we could have been looking at 2-0 down, 3-0 down, But that's just the ebb and flow of a game. They're a good side.
Yeah, and then we had a pretty dodgy, like you say, 10 minutes after that. There was half chance for Kane and a couple of other little bits in there and there, and we were kind of struggling to get a foot on this game. But yeah, 20 minutes in, we started to play somehow. I don't know what changed or whether, it was just that dodgy
Mourinho was going apoplectic on the sideline. Like, he was losing his mind because we were lucky to get away with some of the possession and some of the territory we gave away. And I think he seemed to be signalling anyway. A big part of the problem was just a bit of positional discipline for one other of our midfielders. I think Matic was sitting pretty deep, but Herrera and Pogba were both pushing, and it just wasn't working. And as soon as Herrera it's not that he stopped trying to play football, but if they have the ball, there's no point in you making runs, and he really just started to do a man job on Ali and sit on him and kind of be there in the defensive and launch attacks, which I think is his best, his best suit for us. And as soon as that started happening, I think, our game started to come into it more than Spurs, and we started to get that control.
Yeah, and even though, as bad as Pogba might have been early on, he makes up for it. I think it was, 25 minutes in. A great ball. And yeah, actually a really great header as well from probably one of the smallest men on the pitch, Sanchez. You sometimes forget actually how small he is. I think he's only like 5'6" or something like that. But yeah, to direct that one in was a top finish from him from there. And like you say, he's a man for the big occasions, scores every time he plays at Wembley. And yeah, this is what we kind of been waiting for, really. As you said, Craig, he hadn't been so great so far, but he had pulled it out in the big game for us. He had a top influence against City, pretty much a hand in all three of our goals that day. And then, yeah, today finishes it off well, coming in from the right side. I mean, Ryan, you were saying you prefer to see him playing out left, right? Playing from the right, where it's starting from the left. I mean, yeah, it's something that we talked about when he first came in as well. We all expected he'd go right and Martial would stay left. But yeah, it's not been like that. Do you think he can do the same job from us on the other side?
Absolutely. I think it was a surprise because Martial had been doing so well on the left. He and Rashford had been rotating in that position at the beginning of the season. He kind of made it his own, hadn't he, sort of through Christmas and into the new year. So it kind of seemed that he was one of the higher performing outfield players. And it didn't really make a lot of sense to disrupt that. And Sanchez is someone who, although he spent most of his time at Arsenal either wide on the left or through the middle, early in his career at Udinese and at Barcelona, he played on the right predominantly, so it's definitely a role he can play. And as I said, he's going to drift all over anyway, so why not just have him do that from the right? And where United also have better natural width in the fullback area on the right, because Valencia is a naturally right-sided player, whereas Ashley Young isn't, and Luke Shaw doesn't seem to be getting into the team too often. So it just it didn't make a huge amount of sense to put him in at the expense of Martial or indeed Rashford for a kickoff. So I definitely would like to see that, at least given a few games, to see how that balance could work out.
Yeah, we were very surprised at the time, actually, and we all thought that Martial would keep his place and Sanchez would play maybe right, maybe come in behind the striker. But yeah, we thought, like you said, he was in a good run of form at the time. Martial scored quite a few goals, winning goals as well for us at that time. We really needed those goals. And so, yeah, I did think it was a bit strange at that time. And there now is all these rumours that, Martial wants to leave. He doesn't want to sign a new contract. Who knows how much of all that is true. Will definitely be a shame if he leaves. But yeah, Sanchez can definitely play on the right. I mean, when Rashford came on, he came on the left and Sanchez did switch to the right. So yeah, he can definitely play that side. And he has done in other games as well, been moved around here and there. So yeah, we'll have to see in the future how that goes. I mean, I saw some comments from Pochettino, and he said he thought that we were lucky to go in 1-1 at half time. What do you think, Craig? Were we lucky, or would you say it was, Tottenham definitely had the first 20 minutes or so, but I actually thought we came back into it pretty well, and by half time, I'd say we were almost even. But yeah, he thought that they was really still well ahead of us. What did you think, Craig?
I mean, I think it was nothing to do with luck at all. We fought after the first 20 minutes to get back to that position. It's not like we had a lucky goal. It was because of skill from Pogba, and then Sanchez actually managing to get that header somehow. I think Pochettino, or however you say his name, well, I just call him the Poch, is just feeling a bit bitter, I think, because he is proven to be a bit of a specialist in failure. And he's just gutted that Spurs have failed once again. And all he can do is, like all the managers, every time it doesn't go their way, they put out some half-assed excuse that doesn't even have any merit most of the time. Like Klopp was saying the pitch was dry, and he always says it's windy, and he moans about offside. Now Poch is talking about how we were lucky when it was pretty much an even half. Like they had the first half, that we had the second half of it, and it's not luck. Like to come back and fight like that, and actually still go into half time the better team. It's not luck at all. It's determination and skill.
There was some sort of odd post-match comments as well. He sort of made reference to Spurs with like a level of detachment that you might expect from someone who maybe doesn't see their future there. He said something along the lines of, what Tottenham need to do is this, and this, or Tottenham need to invest or keep their players or whatever it was. It wasn't, us or we. It was kind of Spurs. And I think he actually said, whether that's with me or without me, before me or after me.
Yeah,
he did.
And
it's odd, I do think the good ship Spurs, they needed a big win. And even he said all along, the FA Cup doesn't do it for us. There's plenty of instances of teams, average teams to good teams winning the FA Cup, and it does very little for you as a club. It doesn't cement your place amongst the big clubs. It doesn't launch you to that next level, So I actually really understood, and I know a lot of people on the CAF, Spurs are, in no small part due to one or two Spurs fans on Redcalf, but Spurs are like, Redcalf's favourite punching bag alongside, red and white cop and stuff like that. And people do love to throw the boot in and kind of say, well, look, they need to take anything they get. They need to take a League Cup and FA Cup because it instills that winning mentality. Look at Fergie at the start of his career. It went from the precipice of disaster to, a dynasty basically on the strength of an FA Cup win and stuff like that, And there's definitely some merit in that, but I really do understand Pochettino when he says, it's Champions League or league. We need to cement ourselves. That it's an extremely competitive league, and you need to, put yourself on the map that way. But consistently second, consistently third, consistently going out in the group stages to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, consistently going out of the cups and playing odd teams, it's just going to pop soon. There's too many players there who are good enough to play elsewhere, and I do think maybe this summer, maybe next, I think you're going to start to see the dissolution of that team, which would be quite sad for Spurs, but I'm sure they'll get plenty of money to reinvest, and that they've had good teams before Pochettino, and he's sort of taking them on to that next level. But he was a bit bitter and he was a bit odd afterwards. It's ultimately another disappointing season for them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't actually have any animosity towards Spurs. They're not a team that we've ever traditionally had any big rivalry with. And in fact, for a long time, they were an easy 6 points for us every year. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I always used to look forward to playing Tottenham. And I think I've mentioned before that my brother is a Spurs fan as well. And yeah, in fact, I was pretty open on this podcast and other times that Pochettino was my number one choice after it was obvious Van Gaal wasn't doing the business. I still think he's a top-class manager.
I don't think him not winning things with this Spurs team is a nail in the coffin by any stretch. I think he's proven himself to be an extremely good manager. And if he goes to a big club, he'll win things.
Yeah, look, but Spurs, I mean, you've got to give them credit for the work they've done with lesser budgets than other clubs to even, they're now looking like regular Champions League for a couple of seasons at least. But like you say, it was all supposed to have been their day. The one year they were playing at home, they'd got rid of that Wembley hoodoo this season by winning some big games. So yeah, all the papers were writing that this was the year Spurs were going to do it. But yeah, obviously we had other ideas, thankfully. And yeah, the atmosphere on the day was a good atmosphere. Like I said, I was up in the top tier, and it was actually this year, I think we did it last year as well, that we designated a kind of singing section at Wembley as well, and that was mostly behind the goal we were attacking in the first half. And yeah, there was some good kind of noise coming from that end, and even all around me in the top tier there was at least good pockets of noise here and there. At Wembley, when you have that many fans, it's not going to be the same as a normal away day when you just have 3,000-4,000 of the real hardcore. But yeah, there was a good buzz about the match. And yeah, a good bit of banter going home as well with the Spurs fans. they were obviously weren't happy about it. Lots of "you're supposed to be at home" and everything, and a few little scuffles nearly breaking out, but nothing too hardcore.
You in the middle of all of them, Nick?
Well, no, I like to just watch from the sidelines, you see. But it's the funny thing about Wembley, because you're sent into two different ends.
Yeah.
So this time we had the west side and Tottenham were east, and at the end you kind of funneled back out towards the tube stations as well,
one big
with
mass.
like almost side by side. The Spurs are to the right and we're to the left, so we're obviously, if you're the winners, it's great, you're singing all the way home, you're waiting for the tube, singing all the way, and the other fans have to listen to that. I mean, I still remember, I think it was 2011, going to the semi-final when we lost to City, and then you're the bloody fans who have to wait for the tube listening to the other lot singing and everything, and it's the worst thing
got
ever.
Sent off? Yeah, Toure scored. Was that game?
I think it might have been that one. Like I say, a lot of these things blur into one. That's why I'm relying on you today, Colm, of what happened in this game. Because when you go to these semi-finals, there's quite a bit of drinking involved beforehand. So I'm not have the best memory of all the details of the game yesterday, to be honest. But yeah, I thought it was a good day out from my perspective, anyway. But yeah, look, second half. I think Mourinho, he mentioned that he kept the team in a little bit longer at half-time. It was a minute or two we came out after Spurs, and he was definitely not happy about, quite a few things. And a lot was said at half-time for sure. Second half, I'd say, was a pretty... objectively, it was a pretty even half for both teams. And there was chances either side. But, I mean, how did you see it, Ryan? Were you confident then after that half-time went on?
Yeah, pretty much. When you look back at it, you can't really think of too many times De Gea was stretched into making anything other than a really routine save. I think the last time I can remember them really, really threatening was there was that deflected shot from Eric Dyer pretty much on the half-time whistle, but I think they were just very blunt in attack. I don't think Kane looked fully fit. I think Eriksen was their standout player, but other than him, I thought Ali had a good first half too. But aside from that, I think they looked a bit subdued. I think Moussa Dembele didn't look himself. He kind of looked. It was kind of real reversal of fortunes for him against Pogba this time out, having got the better of that battle in January, and now Pogba completely outrun him and outplayed him, especially for the goal too. Just muscled him off the ball, which is something you don't often see with Dembele. I think Spurs, as I mentioned, are kind of blunt. Son wasn't quite in sync with everybody. They didn't ever really look like clicking into gear. And like going into the final 20 minutes, it was all the onus was all on Spurs to try and push for a goal, but they couldn't really put anything together. So I think that just plays into United's hands. It plays into Mourinho's hands. He knows all about shutting down games, and if you're not going to really bring it to him, then he's just going to be laughing. So it was pretty straightforward in the end, really.
Yeah, I kind of felt as well. When we came back to 1-1, and by half time, you're feeling pretty confident going into the second half. Like, you wouldn't say there was so many like big chances, but the game, ebbed and flowed. And I think it was a good game for the neutral, at least. I mean, that was the big thing I'd said pre-match. I just hope that it's a decent game and it's not one of these 0-0s where there's just one little chance that nicks it 1-0 somewhere, like our game was earlier in the season at home with them. So I think, for the neutrals, it was a decent, proper cup game. Both teams kind of going for it and, trying to win it. Thankfully, our boy Herrera pops up. I mean, Colm, what do you remember from the goal?
Very good goal. Very good goal. Notwithstanding Lukaku's terrible touch that turned into a very handy pass, but no, it was a good breakaway goal. I was so pleased that Herrera got the finish, and a good little finish. I think if form goes with his legs, he probably saves it. I don't think it's the best bit of keeping, although I do think he's slightly unsighted. Lingard does very well to leave it. I actually thought he got a little touch and kind of rolled it just ever so slightly more into Herrera's path, but I don't think he does actually touch it at all. I think he just waves his foot at it, but doesn't actually make any contact. Herrera comes onto it like a steam train and just puts the foot through it straight away and just gets a little ping on it, and it just does enough, and I think it's close enough, and he gets a fresh enough kind of connection that it's passed for him before he really has any idea what to do. But I think, it's an unfair comparison, but De Gea saves that with his foot all day long, literally all day long. It's a mistake to go with his hands, but lovely little goal again. Sanchez very involved, Pogba involved a little bit, and just a good goal. I kind of felt the goal was coming for us. I thought some of our counter-attacking play, which was mainly how we got at Spurs, could have been a little bit sharper and a little bit better. Lukaku was okay, just although was starved of any real great service or any great chances. It wasn't. The first half was quite expansive and quite end to end and quite good for the neutral. I would think in that sense. The second half was very much an exercise in game management and an extremely efficient and impressive one. But it stops becoming a kind of a great spectacle at that stage, because I think we were quite confident that once we got the goal, that was the game over. And I think even if Herrera hadn't scored then, we would have just scored, 5 minutes later, whatever, we would have created a chance and taken the chance. But after that, I think we were always going to sit in and let them come at us. And it was really quite easy for us, really, to be honest, which is a bit of an indictment on Spurs and their kind of ability to kind of get past the three-man midfield, which I think was just the total hindrance to them. Dembele was sat so deep because of Pogba, basically, and he was still losing that battle that he couldn't get forward and go on those kind of marauding runs that he loves to do. But I was so pleased for her because he's had such a poor season, and he's gone from, one of our players, I know it's always David Hay, but really our outfield player of the year last year, an absolutely dominant season and a good United career, and he always showed up with goals and just tremendous performances against Chelsea and stuff like that, man marking jobs, just great performances. A lot of people saying, look, is Kante any better than him, in the season that Kante was probably the best player in the league, to just a non-event and a non-fixture this year, barely able to get a game. At the start of the season he was poor, there's no doubt in it. There's a very good reason why he hasn't played as many minutes as he normally would for us, is because at the start of the year he was just doing very little to nothing. It was very odd, and whether that's kind of some kind of issue with Mourinho tactically, because he was one of those players that Mourinho thought, he always spoke about, I need players who can change in game, who can be tactically aware, who can figure things out for themselves, who have that intelligence. And like Herrera is that in a nutshell. He's dicky with his fouls. He can slow a game down. He can roll around the floor. He can pick up yellows. He can annoy people. He can play extremely well. He gets us moving very quickly. There's so many good things he does, but this year he's just been not there. So the resurgence against City, I thought he was brilliant in the second half. And then again yesterday, I think after the first 20 minutes, him and Pogba were joint man of the match. Couldn't pick between them. I thought he was excellent. And I'm now of the opinion that the starting midfield for us, which I think should be a midfield three, should be Herrera, Pogba and summer signing, with Matic there, for when we need him or for the odd game, but not Pogba, Matic, summer signing. I would love to see Herrera kind of roll that over in the next year, because I think he is a super player.
Interesting, because Matic is obviously a big favourite of Mourinho's, and
Of course he is, and I think that's one of the slight issues and something that has already been touched on, and I was going to mention, obviously, the fact that we haven't played Sanchez on the right and Martial on the left, or at least not enough, or Sanchez in the middle. It sort of harkens to this rigidity of Mourinho. That's one of my big stumbling blocks with him. I go back and forth with him quite a lot and have done on the podcast, but one of the things that really disappoint me is how, in some ways, we have to be so rigid and we have to stick to this one thing that we think will work, almost, to the point where it's been totally proven to be not as good as something else or whatever. Even the three-man midfield, these things, why is it taking us until this stage of the season to implement that, to do that, And I just think sometimes he is too rigid, and I think, don't get me wrong, Matic has had an unbelievable season, but you're talking about another aging player there. And sometimes he does get ran around for fun, so it's just one of those points where I think Mourinho sticks too firmly to one thing, or too firmly that he has to have this one thing, or that one thing can't happen. We can't play Martial anywhere but left, or we can't play Sanchez out right, or we can't do this or that, and we just won't even countenance anything to the opposite. Whereas sometimes I think a little more of an open mind would unleash some of our our attacking play, and certainly some of our frustrations as fans.
You scored some important goals for the club, some fantastic goals for the club, some in this competition, but how does a winner in a semi-final at Wembley rank?
I know I have to keep the balance of the team sometimes with Nemanja, because we have Paul, which is a fantastic player who can create everything, so we have to leave him sometimes free, and I have to be more next to Nemanja, but I try to be sometimes in those positions where I can score, and I did it. I think Romelu is scoring a lot of goals, Jesse, Anthony, Marcus, Alexis now as well. So we have fantastic players in attack, but we have to add also our goals to improve the team.
But yeah, I echo what you said. I was ecstatic for Herrera, and we said similar after City actually that it was great to see him perform in a big game and come back into the team. I mean, there was a point a couple of months ago where it almost looked like Scott McTominay was ahead of him in the pecking order, and that he was like, going to be leaving in the summer or whatever. But 2 big games now and 2 big performances, and he is a fan favourite. I think Alex was egging me on to sing Herrera's song on the last podcast, but so I'm not quite ready for any karaoke sessions just yet. But yeah, the fans love him. So yeah, it was great to see him pop up there with a rare goal as well. Match-winning goal from him. And for me, it was man of the match. I mean, they gave it to Sanchez on the day, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Man of the match for me as well.
What about you, Craig? Who was your man of the match?
I went Sanchez.
You went Sanchez, all right.
I just went for the easy option.
Couldn't even want him to start.
Yeah, I know. But I went with the easy option, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think for 44% of the CAF voted Sanchez as well.
Did they? All right, I didn't see that.
I think a lot of people just kind of voted with who was man of the match on the day, named, rather than choosing their own. One thing though I want to say about Herrera is that obviously he is a fan favourite, and there's actually a GIF that I saw earlier that United, obviously the spitting on the City badge will elevate him to god levels, but there's one from the Spurs game where he's actually on the floor, and when a Spurs player goes to kick the ball, and he actually grabs the guy's foot and stops him kicking the ball, and that for me is just perfect. It's one of those things that United fans will just see and think, yeah, he's definitely one of us.
Yeah, I mean, in a similar ilk, I think Phil Jones is probably worthy of a mention. Absolutely stunning challenge in the first half. Son whipped the ball in, and Ali, I think, is coming immediate to the front post, and he just throws himself at it and gets a great clearance and also clatters Ali. But throughout, I mean, it was a montage of silly faces and a similar montage of great defending. And, both he and Smalling, I think, deserve great credit for... like the whole team, remaining strong when we were really tested in the first 20 minutes and keeping Kane in their back pocket. I agree with Ryan. I don't think Kane is fit. I don't think he has been for the last few weeks.
Do you know why, though?
Well, he was off. He was injured, though. He got a small injury, didn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, I think they rushed him back for the Golden Boot.
He's been spending so much time going over all the Spurs goals from the season to see which ones he can claim that he's just too knackered because he wants the Golden Boot so desperately. That's what he has to do.
Yeah, I couldn't. I know it's probably been discussed on the last podcast, but I couldn't believe that. Between swearing on his daughter's grave, it's a horrible thing to do. To actually being awarded with that goal, and then Pochettino coming out and saying that Kane's been very upset by all the internet, hardship that he's had to deal with as a result. And I'm like, geez, what is this? What? It's like a cartoon or some sort of parody. It's not like real football. That's just ridiculous. But there's something very odd there. But I like Harry Kane. I like him a lot, and I think he's a super footballer. But credit, Smalling and Jones. They were both fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I'm still pretty much of the opinion that we need an entire new back four, or at least 3 additions, at a push 2. But I don't need them to leave the club just quite as quickly as maybe I thought a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, fair enough. So we had 2 votes, man of the match for Herrera, 1 for Sanchez. What about you, Ryan? Who was your man of the match yesterday?
When it was announced, I thought it was a little bit strange. I did think Sanchez, was good. It was one of his better performances for United so far. But I thought Herrera and Pogba were the 2 best players on the pitch. I would have given it to Pogba just because I guess he's somebody I enjoy watching. And I feel like to a wider audience, he never seems to get the credit that he deserves. He's under more scrutiny than just about any player in the world, really. And people just seem to be waiting on him for making a mistake or to be waiting for a big game to pass him by so they can make that accusation about him. But this is the second big game in the last month now that he's really shown up in and been a difference maker. I thought once he got over that initial, I thought both he and Herrera were pretty bad in the first 20 minutes or so, but they both were superb thereafter. And yeah, Jones deserves a mention too. I saw that back 4 without Eric Bailly in it, and I thought that could be trouble. They got the run around a bit the last time out.
Yeah, I think a lot of people thought Bailly was going to start this game and that he'd been rested the other day, but he wasn't even on the bench, was he? I don't know if he was injured.
No, I wonder if he's on the naughty step. I don't know what's gone on.
Yeah, I'd kind of heard a few people saying, "Is there something he's done because he's 100% fit again?" Well, as far as we know, he isn't on any lists. To say he's not available. Put it that way. So whether it's a small thing or a training ground injury or something like that, and they just haven't briefed the press in that regard, because it does seem like he's slightly out of favour, which is odd because for me, he's still, I know he struggled a little bit this year, come back from injury, but he's still our number one choice for me.
By a long way as well, really. I mean, centre half. I thought the Liverpool game, even though he scored that ridiculous own goal, which you always want to praise him for it. It was so ridiculous. But other than that, he was pretty much flawless in that game, and it was kind of one of those situations where you thought, "Oh, thank God he's back."
And I don't get what the naughty step could be, because I think Mourinho could forgive quite a few mistakes on by his part before he reached levels of Smalling and Jones' mistake making. Because throughout this year, and Mourinho's been very praiseworthy of Smalling, he's played the most games and stuff like that, and they haven't been awful. We obviously have a good defensive record this year, but there have been quite a few defensive errors and just complete inability on the ball, which he's already spoken about, how if we could pass the ball out from the back better, he wouldn't have to do this and he wouldn't have to do that. Quite a lot of our game plan is built around the fact that we can't necessarily do what we want to do in the first place by building from the back or having a wee bit more composure. And when you look at other teams' centre halves and what they're capable of doing, it does just look like we're hamstrung slightly by that. So it does amaze me that Eric Bailly didn't start, but credit to them. The England pairing got it done big time. They were both very, very, very good.
Yeah, it is. We haven't probably got time to go into it in great detail on this show, but it's slightly strange that we go into a big game like this with a back four of Valencia, Smalling, Jones and Young, who are all obviously players who were here from Fergie's time. Mm-hmm. And we spent, a fair bit of cash on the defence, bought in 4, 5, maybe, 6 different defenders in the last few years. But yeah, that still looks like our first choice at the moment. Especially Valencia and Young obviously aren't getting any younger. I thought Young did struggle a little bit in this game, and, he's doing a good job as somebody doing a pretend job of being a left back, but he's never really been that. So we have to see where we go with these different positions in the summer. But look, the team came through there. It was a good day for the fans. Now we're going to obviously go on for our final. We do have a few matches in the meantime. We've got Arsenal coming up on the weekend and a few others. Last time we recorded was against City, and we did play a couple of games. We'll give a brief mention to. Obviously, we went down to West Brom just a few days after beating City, beat the top team, lose to the bottom, which has kind of been a bit of the story of our season, hasn't it? I mean, all the games we've lost have been like your likes of Huddersfields and Newcastles and whatever.
Sevilla.
Yeah, I mean, all right, you can't put Sevilla in the same kind of bag as some of those teams, but has been games.
It's got beat by 5-0 in the Copa del Rey final by Barca.
Did they? I didn't see 5-0.
that. All right. Although it was a bit of a, or 4-0 maybe.
It was
5.
Was it 5? It was a bit of a. I mean, they had their chances, put it that way. It was more open. Barca actually probably surrendered a bit of the ball and caught them on the counter quite a lot. Not that this is any kind of Spanish league program, but. Yeah, that's what happened. That's still going to be the big gripe of the season, but it wasn't really a 5-0. Barca were very clinical.
Yeah, I don't know what happened against West Brom. I mean, Ryan, what do you put that down to? You just think they were still having a bit of a City hangover, or what?
I think all season, it probably goes back since Fergie left. An inability to break down teams who just want to come and sit deep and defend narrowly. I think it's been a real issue for United for a long time.
It's true. It has been something that we saw under Van Gaal, and there's some of the same issues that have been going on for quite a few years. And we were talking about this on the podcast, like I say, under Van Gaal, and it's been the same scenario for a while. I don't know. Like I say, I do think a lot of it after you have that big kind of victory. Then you get the bottom team turning up, and I think there is something in it that the players just think, look, we will win this one eventually. We don't have to go all out for it, and it's something that needs to be drummed out of them really. And Mourinho, I'm sure, won't stand for anything like that. He goes along. He was talking big about dropping players and all. In the end, he didn't really. And then we went into that Bournemouth game midweek. I mean, Colm, what do you remember from that one?
I thought it was a really nice game. It was really interesting. It was quite comfortable. Obviously, there was goals in either half. Smalling bar continued his great Premier League goal scoring run. with another good finish, and then Lukaku came on quite late, or well, in the middle of the second half, and scored as well. What I really just liked about it was we saw Luke Shaw have a decent game. We saw Darmian actually play okay, even though I would be quite happy for him to go to Juve in somewhere. It was nice just to see him and actually play with a wee bit more confidence. I think maybe in his acceptance of his fate, I suppose. I think it's maybe sometimes easier for a player knowing they're leaving to come out and just play the way they probably should have been playing the whole time, I thought he was quite good.
Actually, now you mentioned Darmian, like going back to the Spurs game, we all said that, yeah, we felt pretty comfortable at the end. But to be honest, when I saw Darmian's number come up and that he was coming on for Valencia, I did actually start getting pretty worried about what was going to happen in the last
Valencia
10 minutes.
was cramping up and picked up an injury, but Darmian was quite good against Bournemouth. I know it was a bit of a dead rubber game for both teams, really, in terms of the Premier League. I don't think we're going to struggle to get second, and I think it's over for them, for everyone. But he was quite good, and he was good against City, I suppose. There was one kind of botched clearance I can remember, but no big issue. We also saw Rashford and Martial, and it was just really nice to see, a team that I think a lot of people would like to see, or would have liked to have seen more often, I suppose, in that. I suppose it's very easy to give players a chance when you're playing a dead rubber game at the end of the season and resting players for an FA Cup semi-final, but it doesn't stop me enjoying it, because a lot of the enjoyment I get out of football or watching United comes from, players that maybe just aren't, it's easy to give Sanchez 700 million a week and watch him come in and be amazing or not, but where's the kind of, where's the emotional attachment, I suppose, there? And that's not me ragging on Sanchez. I'm very pleased that he's here and he's a very likeable chap, like his dogs, a lot of good stuff there. But, watching Rashford for me will always be a wee bit more special than watching anyone else, even Martial, because he's been with us for a while, because he's that kind of starlet that we're going to go on and talk about now. But to me, and that's another slight criticism, Mourinho, though it's not his fault, it's just something I value personally. I just like to see those players getting a chance, and that was really nice against Bournemouth, in that they all kind of played quite well, and we were very comfortable in, obviously, a dead rubber fixture that you probably couldn't replicate at a different stage of the season. It would be a different game, but yeah, it was still enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very sad for me if Martial left, because then we're paying big money to bring in player, towards the end of his career, Sanchez, and getting rid of a very promising young player
who we also paid big money for. And yes,
yeah, that's true.
I'm sure we would return our investment, because I think his stock has probably just about gone up at United, because I do think the price in the first place was inflated. But I think in today's market, he's definitely worth 50 million.
Yeah, and I mean, last season as well, Mourinho was pretty openly critical of Martial. This season, he seemed to come back into the team a bit more. And like you said, Ryan, he was having a really good run of form before Sanchez turned up. And he actually seems to be the one that's lost out the most from Sanchez coming into the team. I remember talking on this podcast, and we said that, we thought that Mata and probably Lingard would be the players who'd get a lot less minutes now that Sanchez turned up. And we really didn't expect that it would affect Martial's position that much. But yeah, he's hardly had a look in since. I think Martial did start the next couple of games after Sanchez came, but he started on the right and really seemed to struggle to get into the game from the right, which is kind of not that surprising, seeing as being, playing on the left all year long. So yeah, you say you're a big fan of him, right, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, he's a superb player, and I think talent-wise, there's a lot of talk has been about Kylian Mbappe and Ousmane Dembele over the last couple of years, and they've kind of usurped him as the hot young talent on the European and the French scene. But in terms of raw ability, I think he's right up there with those two. I think he has the potential to be one of maybe the best 4 or 5 in the world if he really does, go on to fulfill that potential. So it would be a tremendous shame if United were to lose him. I think there's a bit of a misconception about him as well. There's this kind of feeling among a certain section of United fans that he's still never really done it for United, but I don't think that's fair at all. I mean, he was United's best outfield player in his first season, but by an absolute country mile. He was a kid at the time as well, a 19-year-old lad at a new club, a big club in a new country, didn't really speak the language, and to hit the ground running like he did. I was there for the game against Liverpool on his debut, and he scored that brilliant goal where he just turned, I think it was Skirtle, he turned inside out and finished really coolly. And you just thought, wow, what a prospect we've got here. And then the second season, he had some personal issues going on, which I think would affect any young man, let alone a footballer. I think no matter how much you're earning, you're susceptible to things like that affecting your personal and professional life. Then he came back this season, adapted to the demands that Mourinho was making of him, dealt with being in and out of the team and rotating with Rashford, and was really super productive in terms of providing goals and assists and just adding that spark in the final third that United haven't always had. So I think he's just been really unfortunate in many ways, and I think it'd be a real shame if he were to leave the club in the summer.
Yeah, totally agreed. And look, since we're talking about young players, I think that's probably the right time to start having a chat about the project you've been working on. So, I mean, yeah, why don't you tell us, our listeners, all a bit about the book you've been writing at the moment?
Yeah, so my book is called Next Big Thing, How Football's Wonderkids Get Left Behind. As the title suggests, it's all about these bright young things of football, the young players who are hyped to the moon, and it's an examination of why and what happens when these lads don't quite fulfil their potential. The success stories are well known. The guys like the Rooneys, the Ronaldos, the Messis, people who were burst onto the scene as teenagers and went on to fulfill every expectation and more. But there are also guys who come through with a ton of hype. You might hear about them in the youth team when they come in and hit the ground running at first team level, that for whatever reason they fade away. And then they quite quickly get forgotten about. So my idea is to kind of try and track down some of these players and find out why it was they never really went on to fulfill their potential. Because my suspicion was that it's never really a question of talent with these guys. It's never really a question of desire. It's always something else. It's little factors that can affect any player. It's things like injuries. It can be a relationship with a manager. It can be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or it can be things like competition for places and you just don't get the opportunities you needed, or it can just be luck and timing. There are so many things that can affect any young player's career. So I went out. I've met 15 players for the book, and they all feature as a self-contained chapter. I spoke to coaches who've worked with them, former teammates, and journalists who've covered their careers to get a really good kind of background on this player, find out what it was that affected them. And each player has a different story to tell, a really interesting and unique way that their potential got sort of left unfulfilled, where their development got forgotten about, or it can be anything really. Like I said, it can be injuries. There was one guy. His name was Ryan Green. He played for Wolves in the late 90s, and he took Giggs's record as being the youngest ever Welsh international. He was a senior Wales international at 17, but he told me he just was living the life of a student, effectively. He fell into the trappings of having a bit of money and having a little bit of fame and going out and drinking 6 nights a week. Never really went on to fulfill his potential. Was not too dissimilar tale of Andy van der Meijden, who was, when he was at Ajax in the early 2000s, was one of the best wingers in Europe. Went to Inter Milan. Ajax sold him when he didn't want to be sold. And then his personal life started to spiral out of control. He came to Everton. Fell in love with a stripper that he met on a night out.
Haven't we all?
Yeah, his wife caught him cheating with her because she hired a private eye to go and spy on him, and so he had all these personal issues.
I feel like you could write a book just about this guy.
Yeah, exactly. And he ended up retiring at 30, and he kind of fell into it. He stayed in Liverpool after retired and spent a year just like on drugs and drinking and wild partying every night until he kind of realised and woke up one day and sorted his life out. But those are the kind of trappings that got young guys with money and fame can fall into, and there are other things that are completely out of their control. You know, there's a guy by the name of John Bostock who is still Tottenham's youngest ever first team player and Crystal Palace's youngest ever first team player.
Yeah, he's relatively recent, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he's still playing. He's in the Turkish Premier League now.
Yeah, I know that name. Yeah,
there was a massive, big sort of transfer wrangle over him when he went to Spurs. There's a big fallout with Palace. Simon Jordan took away his family's season tickets. They're all lifelong Palace fans, and they've never been allowed back since. But he went to Spurs because they had this big development plan laid out for him, which I spoke to Damien Comolli, who was the director of football there at the time, and he did the deal. But within a few weeks of Bostock going to Spurs, Comolli and the manager, Juan de Ramos, were sacked. Harry Redknapp came in, and his whole development plan that was laid out for him, the whole reason that he went to Spurs, was completely forgotten about. So he was just left on the sidelines. He was sent out on loan here, there and everywhere. And he ended up going to the Belgian second division to sort of reignite his career. He played in France up until last year and went to Turkey this summer. So he's kind of rebuilding, but were it not for the fact that Comolli and Ramos were were binned quite quickly after him going there, things could have worked out very different. So it's all timing and luck, and little things that you maybe don't appreciate. All these little sliding doors moments. That's kind of what I'm trying to get to the heart of with the book.
It sounds really interesting. Yeah, as well. I think something I wasn't aware of. Obviously, I read up a wee bit on what you were doing, but a different player every chapter sounds like a really, really good idea for it. Just to keep it really fresh and to give a multitude of perspectives. Because as you say, no case is the same, really. You'll come against the same themes. It might be lifestyle, it might be luck, it might be playing opportunities, it might be poor management. But really, every story is an individual story, and very, very, very specific reasons as to why one person didn't work out or whatever. But it is so interesting because you look at like if we just look at United, we've had so many players which are so capable of telling that story. Between looking at Ravel Morrison or Pogba, who actually left, in a mad really way, to leave Ferguson and say no, leave United, which is almost unheard of in itself. We've got Andres Pereira currently in Valencia. What's going to happen there? Like, we've had tons and tons and tons recent and previous of, and that's obviously part of being a big club. Rashford himself only got a start under Louis van Gaal because of a ridiculous line of injuries, and it was only because Will Keane got injured. I think Will Keane got injured. Otherwise, Rashford would never be, and I'm sure he would have. If that door hadn't have opened, one would have somewhere. But now he's 120 games for us, 30 or 40 goals, and he's about to play in his third domestic final with us. Notwithstanding all the other great things he's had in the meantime at England international, and it's just a crazy topic because you just wonder how much of it if they hadn't got that break there, how much of it is their personal fortitude? I can't imagine Ronaldo not being Ronaldo. Like some people, although that is a super rare trait, but that force of personality would just take him there regardless,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to take Ronaldo as an example, he always talks about a guy called, I think his name's Federico Paim, who was at Sporting, he was like a year behind him at Sporting, and Ronaldo's always said that's the most talented guy I've ever seen, and he's playing in like the Portuguese second or third division there in his late 20s. So, I think guys like Ronaldo, that drive was always going to take him far. It would have had to be in something like a debilitating injury, but that can happen. And like you mentioned, the reason I've kept every player's story separate is because they all kind of serve as like a loose case study into a different way it can go wrong. And there are kind of reasons within reasons, like you said. Injuries is a massive factor, but that can mean different things for different people. Like there are 4 United players who feature in my book. One of them, Ben Thornley, who I'm sure
I remember him. Definitely. Yeah, I remember him. He was he was very highly rated as well. Probably more highly rated than quite a few that were household names nowadays.
Yeah, he's Gary Neville has been quoted saying that he's the one guy who people always ask about who are the talented players who you play with, who you were expecting to do more and to go far, and he always points to Ben Thornley. He was widely regarded as of the genuine class of '92, which didn't really include Scholes, it didn't really include Giggs. But it did include the Beckham, the Robbie Savages, Gary Neville, guys like that. Thornley was Thornley was considered the best of that crop by some stretch from what I gather. And it was a catastrophic injury for him. The story is that he was due to play in the semi-final against Oldham in '94 at Wembley. Because Giggsy got injured, so he was going to be on the bench and he was going to be involved. So they said to him, go out in this reserve game, get some match fitness. So he went out and played against Blackburn reserves. He was having a brilliant game. About 70 minutes in, Jim Ryan, the reserve team manager, asked him if he wanted to come off, and he thought, no, I'm having fun here. I'm 19-year-old kid. He's about to go and play in the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley. He was living the dream. He was enjoying this game in the reserves, and then. He said to me himself that turned out to be the worst decision of my life, because a few minutes later, the veteran Blackburn fullback that he'd been given the runaround came and met him in the centre circle and went in knee high on him and obliterated his MCL, his ACL, tore his hamstring. He was out for a year and he was never the same. He lost that spark of pace that really set him apart. So he went from being a guy who was destined to be another Giggs or somebody of that level or a Beckham to being somebody who was at best a squad player and went on to play for Huddersfield and Aberdeen. He's still a good career, but it wasn't what it could have been, and that was through no real fault of his own.
Mad to think. Yeah.
So I was going to say that.
Yeah, sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, as you were saying, like, there are reasons within the reasons. Like, that's one way of getting an injury, like a catastrophic one that that happens, and then forever your career is different. But there are also guys I spoke to, like Matt Murray, who was at Wolves, who was widely regarded as the best English goalkeeper of his generation, more natural ability than Joe Hart, for instance. But he just had the worst luck with persistent injuries. He never got a break. He never really had that one that ended his career that you can kind of get that closure from and you can kind of move on. He was able to come back from every one, but then his body just broke down on him again and again. And he told me a story about phoning Robbie Keane from an ambulance when he was on loan at Hereford, trying to get his fitness back up, and his knee had gone again. He was in tears talking to Robbie Keane, telling him that he knew his career was over at like 26. Or there was a guy called, who's probably not as familiar a name, his name's Lionel Morgan. He played for Wimbledon in the early 2000s when they had a really good crop of youngsters. He was an England under 21 international. He was seen as pretty much, him and Jermaine Genius were the two best English talents at the time. And Genius had just gone to Newcastle. Spurs had come in and offered $7 million for Lionel, because they thought, Genius has gone for this much from Forest. We think Lionel's even better. That's what David Pleat said, who was in charge of Tottenham's transfer at the time. But he ended up failing a medical, and he had to retire at 21. He told me that he knew by the age of 19 that his body wasn't going to allow him a career in the game. So for a guy who had all the talent in the world to kind of feel that his body was never going to let him get to where he should have got to, that's a kind of different side of the injury thing altogether. So yeah, there were so many different unique stories, and yeah, I just felt like they kind of needed to be told and needed their own space to be told and understood, and see if we can kind of learn a little bit from them.
No, yeah, really interesting subject. And, obviously our club, above any other club, I'd say at top level, has like in their DNA a kind of link to bringing in young players. We still have that record of having somebody through the academy in every match day squad for decades and decades. And, I've always kept an eye on kind of young players coming through. Under Fergie, it was always a pattern that when you played kind of the League Cup games and whatever, you'd get to see a few of the next potential lot, and it was always interesting to see who was coming through. And even Mourinho's not done too badly. He's not been as bad as some people feared. At the moment we have people like Angel Gomez and whatever who are interesting and have had a few minutes here and there. And you mentioned Ben Thornley, and then you've got a couple of other United players you interview as well.
Yeah,
right?
he's one of three. I try for more as well. Like as you guys have been saying, you can kind of write the whole book on United. They've had so many like Wonderkids who went on to do everything you wanted them to do. The Fergie's fledglings, of course, achieved incredible things. But there are a lot of options. There were some I tried for who didn't want to be involved, or their people didn't want them to be involved. But the ones I got on board are Ben Thornley, as I mentioned. He was the second interview I did for the book. I went down and met him. He lives in Essex now. He's absolutely lovely bloke. Can't speak highly enough of him. Another guy who is perhaps, it depends what generation you're from as to whether you'll remember him, but he has an incredible story, probably the most unique and interesting story in the book. His name is Giuliano Majorana. He played for United.
Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, it's a kind of a name that will ring a bell, I think, but not too many people will have too vivid a recollection. He was signed.
He was left winger, wasn't he? I think some people thought he might have been like a Ryan Giggs or something. But he was around the same era, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's it. That's what I said to him. You were kind of Giggs before Giggs in many ways. He was a left winger. He was like this olive skin, floppy haired, good looking lad. A wonderful, mesmerising dribbler. He was signed from Histon, who played in the 10th tier in non-league at the age of 19. So it was a real Roy of the Rovers thing. They signed him and played him in a testimonial game as like a trial against Birmingham, offered him a 4-year deal at half-time. And then he was in the first team straight away at 19, coming from non-league. He played against Arsenal in a televised game, gave Lee Dixon an absolute runaround, but he just didn't get on with Fergie at all. And there were some really meaty details of his difficult relationship with Ferguson. He thinks a lot of it was down to the fact that he wasn't he never came through professional clubs academy, so he wasn't that kind of cookie cutter. He said he said to me, I wasn't a yes man. Is what he said. And he said Fergie would constantly dig him out in front of everybody. Everybody would be wondering what was going on, why he was being treated this way. And he kind of got banished to the reserves because his face didn't fit. And he ended up having almost exactly the same injury as Ben Thornley. And it happened in a reserve game. And it was in a challenge with Dwight York, who, of course, years later went on to play for United. So he did his knee and everything, but he'd kind of been rotting in the reserves for a couple of years already because of this relationship with Ferguson. By the time he worked his way back, he kind of lost a little bit of his pace, maybe. He was never going to get back in the United side, and it was before the advent of the Bosman rule too, so he couldn't just leave at the expiration of his contract. He had to stick around because United retained his registration, and he felt like they didn't want to let him go because they knew how good he was. But that's kind of how his career petered out, and it never really got anywhere near fulfilling what he should have. Another guy I spoke to is a guy called John Curtis. He was another Youth Cup winner with United in the 90s, just a few years after the class in 92. Again, if you're kind of my generation, I'm 31. I remember supporting United in the late 90s and seeing the name John Curtis bandied around. That was the first time I'd ever heard the future England captain label given to anybody, which is quite a common thing these days. It's a bit of a curse as well.
Yeah,
gets given out quite a lot.
Phil Jones, United's greatest ever captain, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. Well, John Curtis was the first player I remember being given that. He was somebody who had captained England at every youth level. Every major club in the country wanted him at 14 when he was at Lilleshall. He signed for United. He was the Young Player of the Year at United in '97. He played in that famous game against Arsenal where they won the league at Old Trafford and Overmars scored that goal. For him, he said it was like a mental thing for him. He had what he called a fixed mindset. Now he's a coach over in America now, so he's got a really analytical eye, and he can really quite vividly analyse his own career, which is very interesting. And he was saying it was a fixed mindset that was his problem, because he'd reached the status of being considered, the next big thing. He was this future England captain. Everything he did was to kind of protect that status, and he wasn't really willing to take any risks to develop himself outside of that. He wanted to kind of keep everything everything he could.
Keep doing what he was doing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, keep doing what he's doing, not kind of evolve in the way he needed to, and that's kind of the biggest regret of his career. And the final United player who is on the list, who I've agreed to interview. I've been speaking back and forth with his club, and I'm just trying to tie down a date with them now to go and meet him. But it's Fabio da Silva, who, of course, was as one of the Da Silva twins with his brother Rafael, who came over in, I guess it would have been the mid-2000s when they came over both as teenagers. And, they were two of the hottest young things out of Brazil. And Fabio, when they came over, was actually considered to be the better of the two. He was the left back, Rafael was the right back, but Fabio was kind of two-footed. He could play either side, he could play midfield as well. And he was, if I remember rightly, there was a youth tournament, a youth World Cup that Brazil won that Fabio was the top scorer in from left back, which kind of tells you all you need to know about him and his talent. But
I remember when they came and Rafael started quite instantly, and he was this kind of hot-headed, which a lot of people really liked. It was also a wee bit of an issue, but he really hit the ground running. Everyone was like, this guy's class, we love him. He had that kind of fire that we love to see, as well as great technical ability. And we were like, my God, if this guy's like this, what kind of a left back are we getting as well? But then Fabio was just in the shadows. You were always waiting, and then at a certain point after whatever 8 months to a year, you're kind of like, he's never coming. We're never getting that player that we thought we were getting. So he'll be a very interesting one for a lot of people.
What the main things I think I want to talk to him about are what it was like to sit and watch as your brother went on to do everything that you both were supposed to be there to do. I imagine the main thing that hampered his United career was that it was a simple fact that Patrice Evra was there. Gary Neville was already coming to the end of his career. Maybe he had even retired by the point that Rafael was coming through. So that there was a progression there for him. There was quite a straightforward path to first team football, whereas Fabio just didn't have that. So I imagine that's going to be a big factor that he'll talk about. But I'm really looking forward to that. He's at Middlesbrough now. He's doing quite well in the Championship. He's certainly not a failure of any kind. He's making a good career in the game. But I think he's going to have a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, there's so many stories, of course, that you can go and find, even like you said, even if you're just looking at ex-United players. But yeah, definitely some interesting things there. And I understand, that you're crowdfunding for this at the moment, right, aren't you?
That's right, yeah. The publisher I've signed with, a publisher called Unbound, they do things a little bit differently, whereby they use crowdfunding to fund the publication of their books. So that's the process I'm in now. So I'm running a crowdfunding campaign where you can go over to unbound.com/Wonderkids to see all the information about my book, and you can pledge there. And I'm not asking for money for nothing with this. Every pledge level gets a copy of the book once it's released, and you also get your name in the book as well. So your name goes in every edition of the book. as kind of a thank you and to show my appreciation for your support with this. But I don't just think I'll pick it up when it's on Amazon, because if you wait too long, it might never get there. I need all the support at the front end to get this thing out there, make it real. I do think there's going to be something there for everybody to enjoy. Lots of behind the scenes stories, if that's your thing, and lots of kind of the human element of football too. Go check it out. Go over to unbound.com/Wonderkids and pledge to help my campaign get my book published and get yourself a copy of it.
Yeah, we'll definitely post the link out on Twitter and on Red Cafe so people can have a look at that. I guess, the big kind of, the moral behind all this is that it's not just about talent, is it? Recently, everybody knows the name Ravel Morrison, that everybody always talked about as the most talented everything. And, it's not happened for him because, maybe didn't have the right attitude, or, you got the injuries. And, sometimes as well, you just need a bit of luck, things to go your way. All these different stories.
But there definitely is, particularly, I think, amongst, I don't know about particularly United fans, but certainly in my experience, there's this obsession with the Wonder Kid. It's like this thing that maybe even a certain generation of sort of FIFA or Football Manager kind of students will maybe appreciate more. But I think, broadly, there's this mystique and this excitement about a Wonder Kid, about getting that hot talent. I had a guy the other day telling me that we should just start Tahith Chong ahead of everyone on our current team because he's already better. And I was like, he's not. He's like, he could be an amazing player. I'm not saying he won't be. He's super exciting, but he's not. He's not ready. You're watching him against 16-year-olds be amazing. It's not the same thing, he's not developed. But there is that obsession. There's that desire to want to get that, lock down Neymar when he's still playing out of Brazil, to get that name that no one's ever heard of. And people, it's almost like kind of hipster football as well, that people will go out of their way to find a more unknown player just to appear superior in their knowledge of youth football. But it is exciting. It is what people want. And it's a lovely part of the game because, we then sort of go, I always play the game of, it used to be that I was the same age as the starlets. And now it's like that guy's 11 years younger than me, and I'm like, what? How did my life go so wrong? But it's fun.
Yeah, as I say, it's definitely part of our club's history, all these young players and everything, so it should be of interest to all our fans. And the fact that you're getting Fabio in there will be of interest to our more recent fans. I know some of these names from before. As I say, I'm a little bit older. So like you talk about Colm, I think the likes of maybe Thornley or Curtis are probably more around my age, and so it was like that for me when I was watching them come through about that time. No, it's always interesting to see how these players progress and everything. Talking in general, something people worried about was about Mourinho and how he was dealing with youth, and I actually think that he's done all right. He's brought through. Rashford's got plenty of games, McTominay, and a couple of others have had the odd games here and there.
Lingard's career is completely blossomed in a way that I think not many would have thought of under Mourinho.
Yeah, he's a big fan of his. It'll be interesting actually because now we've got 4 more games left this season in the league. They're not dead rubbers, but there's this kind of slight feel about them that we're kind of going to be waiting for the cup final. I mean, we've got Arsenal next, which normally would be one of the big games of the season. But, Arsenal, I mean, you've got that little bit of story, obviously, that Wenger's now announced that he's leaving. But they're obviously focusing on the Europa League. We've got the cup final coming up. And, so I hope maybe in these 4 games, maybe we might see a couple of young players get a few minutes here and there. It would be a good time.
I think we'll hammer Arsenal, but I just want to see Martial start every single game and sign a new contract. That's all. As well as win the FA Cup, that's all I'm really bothered about for the rest of the season.
All right. No, like I say, I hope there's maybe a chance to give a few other players a run out over the next couple of weeks, see what happens there. I don't know when we'll next record. We'll definitely try and do one before the cup final at some point. We'll see when we turn up again, when we can get everybody together. I think, as I say, things progressing well. Everybody had a good day out of Wembley. Got another few weeks to wait for another Wembley final, third one in the recent seasons. So we're getting used to those trips over there. And a win over there would definitely be considered a successful season. Thanks very much to Ryan for coming on this week. It was interesting to hear your thoughts, and we'll definitely put the links out for your project and the books and everything there. And maybe try and get you back on the podcast future episode to let us know what you think about how things are going at the club.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Cheers, Ryan.
Yeah. Cheers. Good night to all. And we'll give you a shout when we're next on. As I say, if you want to have a look at Ryan on Twitter, it's Ryan at Ryan Baldi FW. And of course, if you're not following us already, at United_hour, follow us on there. And follow the thread on Red Cafe to see the discussion about tonight's podcast. Good night, all.
Cheerio.
Good night.